Photography Daily.
I shoot for me. So if someone likes it, and it doesn't matter if it's the photography in Ireland or Iceland or Yosemite or Chicago, if someone likes it, hey, I feel blessed.
Today, Barry Butler, in our Monday Focus edition on business, talks about the incredible work he's been doing photographing each sunrise and sunset in Chicago. But his story starts at a friendly hockey game.
It turned not to be friendly because I got taken out in the game. Someone decided to take my legs out, and I ended up breaking my collarbone in 1,000 pieces.
Not to be beaten, Barry looks at what he could do as he convalesced.
And I decided to just start teaching myself photography. I picked it up as a kid, especially in my teenage years, but that was like to take it into concerts, smuggle it in and take photos of my favorite artists. But it was never serious because it was on program, or as I like to call, panic.
Today then, we talk about what Barry calls landscape journalism, making the most poetic pictures of the windy city.
You have to slow down, and you have to think, and you have to plan, and have patience. That's not something for someone who is typically an active person.
We talk about how this became his obsession and livelihood.
And so this was not like some great business plan that came about. It evolved organically.
He reveals the difference it's made to his life.
It's taught me everything about life. The first thing that it is taught me is patience. If you keep true to your plan and be patient, things are going to work themselves out.
And you know what I'm like with the overuse of the word awesome in everyday lingo? Today I think there's a scene that actually deserves the power of this word.
As I was seeing the radar and where the lightning patterns were coming, I'm like, it's just a matter of time. And I was just hoping that the rainbow would hold. And then all of a sudden, boom. Yeah. And it was awesome. I've never had that before, where rainbow and lightning all at the exact same time on the same building. Stories
of life told by photographers, and today that photographer is Barry Butler in Chicago.
When you get the photograph that you like, it will make my day. It just charges me like, wow, that was all worth it. It was worth getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Mondays, we talk with photographers worldwide, digging a little deeper into their business stories, a focus on how they work and what they did to launch where they are now and what the future holds. A chance to hear their stories to help your own. Patron of the day today is Elliot Thomas with his Ricoh GR3, which I know is a favourite amongst many street photographers. And I'm going to link to his 365 project in particular on the show page today, which is at EGT_photo365. There's one on your grid in particular, Elliot, that had an eerie War of the Worlds type feel. Black and white, exposed well for a sun breaking through the clouds, creating silhouettes of what looked like, well, they're kind of cranes. The kind you might find at a dockyard, but they resemble the Martian invasion ships of the latest movie, not perhaps the original flick of the 50s. I'll actually link to his Instagram account and also this particular picture on the show notes today. I'm not sure if this was in your mind when you shot it, but that's what I see anyway. And I like the way that you've made highlights for each month so far. Be a patron of the day and hear 2 extra diary episodes every week by joining our club via the Patreon link on photographydaily.show. We're also supported by mpb.com, the #1 platform when it comes to trust for buying and selling and trading used camera gear, with offices and warehouses now in Brighton, UK, Brooklyn, USA and Berlin in Europe. Heard from a patron, Brad Walcott, who, after a particularly bad experience trying to sell a lens on a general marketplace platform, wink wink, heard me mention MPB and decided to give them a try. He says, I've bought, sold and traded lenses and equipment now from MPB, and I don't think I'll consider using anyone else. They're fair, they're honest, and everything I've received from them has worked perfectly. Well, that's music to my ears, and I'm sure MPB.com's too. I hope you had a good weekend. I had the most surreal one, which will be leading to this Wednesday's guest, and I'll tell you about during the show later on today. Suffice to say, I didn't think that on a rainy Saturday in May, I'd be sat under a makeshift rain cover with a complete legend of British photography culture. Later on, I'll tell you who that's going to be. So to today's guest, Barry Butler was suggested to me by Stephen Collinson, who was fascinated by his work. I'll not need to say too much at this stage, as Barry pretty much tells his story perfectly from the start. I do want to say, though, that I think I learned a valuable business lesson recording this one, which I do hear mentioned by successful creatives from time to time. Shoot for you. Before you think about shooting for the dollars, the pounds, the euros, or insert currency of your choice here. Shoot for you. That doesn't mean, of course, that if you photograph portraits now that you're shooting for yourself above what they need, because plenty of the world's best portrait photographers will suggest you're in service too, but it does mean that before you become a photographer of any particular genre, that you're choosing it because it's for you. You're shooting for you because you love news, or you love culture, or sport, or weddings, or portraits, or underwater, or well, you get my drift. Quite literally with the latter. I think you'll fall in love with Barry's enthusiasm and love of what he does within the first 5 minutes. I know I did. Barry, before we even get to raising a camera, your story about making pictures is an interesting one, because hockey's loss is photography's gain, really, isn't it? It was quite a horrific accident that you had as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. I don't know why I thought I had this idea that I could play professional hockey. Just joking. But I was playing in a friendly game, and it turned not to be friendly because I got taken out in the game. Someone decided to take my legs out, and wow. I ended up breaking my collarbone in 1,000 pieces.
Was it really 1,000 pieces?
Yeah, it was just completely shattered.
Wow.
So, normally with a collarbone break, they'll put a pin in because those are usually clean breaks. Mine wasn't. It was just the entire thing. So it was not a good process. And it's why I had to spend 8 months doing nothing. I couldn't even drive for 3 months because the damage was so significant. I just looked at, okay, what am I going to do? And all that time, because I'm an active type of person. Yeah. And I decided to just start teaching myself photography. I picked it up, as a kid, and especially my teenage years. But that was like to take it into concerts, smuggle it in, and take photos of my favorite artists. But it was never serious because it was on program, or as I like to call, panic. And took my shots, and that was about it. But when I broke my collarbone, I said, I want to teach myself, and that was during film. And so it was a very, very expensive way to teach myself.
It was.
You take the photographs, you send the film to, a processor, and then you'd wait, and then you come back and you look at all your mistakes, and, you just spent $20 on processing. And whereas now, obviously, you look at the back of the screen, you realize your mistakes.
But equally, you were working with one hand as well, weren't you? You couldn't use the...
Yes. Well, and a tripod, that's what helped. And to this day, I am... I would say 98% of my shots are on a tripod. Yeah. Definitely the exception is when I fly in a helicopter. But it kind of started there because just the stability of having your camera on the tripod, and I could work one arm. That's how it all started. So
it's a kind of a slowed down thing, isn't it? When you work with a tripod, you learn to be slower. You learn to observe in a totally different way. Had you not had that accident, but had you taken up photography, it may not have been landscape work. You may have found yourself wandering the streets of Chicago doing street work.
Probably, because it would never have clicked in my head to do photography. Because to your point, it's something that you have to slow down, and you have to think, and you have to plan, and have patience. That's not something for someone who's typically an active person.
Although I hear that it was your late father who really inspired you to live your life through the lens. He really encouraged you, didn't he?
Yeah, he was my biggest cheerleader. But, that's what's great about, your parents. You could probably be the worst at your doing, and they just sit there and go, keep it going, and you believe their enthusiasm. But my dad was like that. Yeah. And then until, his final days, he was always cheerleading my stuff. And, I miss that. He's been gone 2 years, and there are many times where I have come back from a shoot and really proud of something I've taken, and I'd love to be able to show it to him.
Yeah, but he did get to see your success, which is important.
Except for the book. He saw everything except for the book, and that was the thing that he would say, you got to do the book, right? And then I know that once he would see the book, he would sit there and say, okay, you did the one on Chicago. where's the one in Ireland? So he would keep me going in that respect. And when I finally completed the book, I kept on thinking that my dad would be saying, where's the book in Ireland now? So, so he is in my head. I miss the fact that he's not seeing what's come of, especially the last couple of years.
Well, with the voice of Dad in your head, because I don't think those voices ever really leave us. You've just got to go back to Ireland and do this book now, because otherwise that voice will just get louder.
Yeah, and I usually go back home twice a year.
Yeah.
But because of the pandemic, I've had 5 trips canceled in the last year. It's been very frustrating. My next attempt, and I feel good about this one, I'll be in Ireland at the end of September.
Good.
And God willing, I have to think that by then, it'll be a good situation to be there.
So the story is that Dad, your family brought you over as when you were a young lad from what part of Ireland were you, by the way?
Wexford.
Wexford
County, Wexford, southeast, sunny southeast of Ireland, and a lot of people bypass that area.
No, I know
there's just so much history, and the Vikings and everything, and then the prettiest lighthouse in the world is there, Hookhead Lighthouse. If you haven't been there, that's, you can burn me up and throw my ashes in that area, because it's one of the prettiest areas, I think, in Ireland.
Well, which lighthouse would you choose then? Because the one in Chicago is not too shabby.
Oh, Hookhead in County Wexford is the one.
Is the one.
So that, yeah. So, just real quick one on Hookhead. Hookhead is the oldest operating lighthouse in the world. It's over 800 years. A beacon of light has been there.
Wow.
And then if you ever heard the cliche, by hook or by crook, that's where it came from.
Is it?
Yeah. So when Cromwell was going to invade Ireland, they felt he was going to either come by the hook or by crook. And Crook is a town in Waterford.
Wow, I never knew
that's how that phrase came about.
That's fabulous.
Yeah. But look up that that lighthouse. The whole area is just spectacular, especially for any landscape photographer. You could spend days there.
But talking of landscape, that is how you, before we even get anywhere near city, the landscape is how you started. And I think that's where you expected really your photographic interests and career to head, probably, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah. So I rarely took shots seriously in Chicago. No. I was, I would be shooting in Ireland, or I would go to the national parks here in the United States, or some of the scenic coastal areas in the United States. That's where I would be doing my photography. And I think anyone would understand this, that, if you're not photographing on a daily basis, and let's say you've taken a few weeks off or a couple of months off, and then you decide to go somewhere, you're fumbling with your equipment. You're like, okay, oh wait, I can't believe I forgot that. Or, just the simple things, like you get into rhythms. And I felt that many times that I was going out on trips. So I said to myself, you know what, why don't I treat shooting around Chicago as my pregame, my preparing for a game. And, but no one's going to care about these shots. Who cares about buildings? Who cares about, the city look? So I would take the shots and think nothing of it. And this was just at the start of social media, when it started to get hot. What year are we in? We're in 2021. So whether it was 2007, 2008, when it started to really get rolling. And I would put my Chicago shots up there and just say, hey, I was out at Fullerton Avenue Beach today. And oh man, check this out. And people are like, wow, I really like that. I'm like, oh, I'm going to Yosemite tomorrow. I'll show you some shots then. And they're like, no, I really like that. And so I had a friend who was really kind of kicking me in the rear end and saying, you should really do more of the Chicago stuff, because you're showing stuff that people don't see. Yeah. And I'm like, okay. And then as I was doing this more often, I was starting to fall in love photographically with the city. And the rest is history, because then I kept on posting on social media, and it just turned into a snowball. And so this was not like some great business plan that came about. It evolved organically.
Was there a sense of disappointment that folks weren't buying the Yosemite and they were buying the towers and because your landscape work is absolutely beautiful.
Oh, thanks. And this is the God's honest truth. I shoot for me. So if someone likes it, and it doesn't matter if the photography in Ireland or Iceland or Yosemite or Chicago, if someone likes it, hey, I feel blessed.
Yeah.
But if they don't, it's okay. I liked it. As a matter of fact, I'm always amazed at times, when especially I post daily, and I'll do a tremendous amount of planning on a shot, and I get it perfect. And if I measured that shot based on likes, I would probably be disappointed, because there are times where I decide to just turn my head. I'm like, oh wow, look at that, boom, 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 and people are going gaga over a shot that I really just instinctively decided to change my composition or whatever, and not what I originally had planned. So, what's funny, I have a lot of discussions with camera clubs, students at schools. And one of the things that I keep on reminding them is that whatever artistic thing that you want to do, make sure that you do it that you love, and not because other people love what you do.
Although there is a slight contradiction here, because I do think social media was pushing you towards Chicago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, this was a defining point for you when you thought, well, I will go and properly cover this city, and that you have done almost every sunrise, almost every sunset. So it was a definite advantage, wasn't it? Having people on social media saying, Barry, this is it. This is what I want. Show me more.
Yeah. It's great to get that. But I'll tell you, I enjoy the hunt every day of coming up with where would probably be the neatest spot for me to plant myself to take a photograph. I love that. And all my shots are planned. So I don't walk in a situation where, okay, well, I'm just going to show up at this spot and let's see what happens. I really put a lot of work into it, and it starts 24 hours ahead of time where I'm going to be tomorrow morning, tomorrow evening, or whatever. So I enjoy that. Like, okay, the sun is going to be here. The winds are going to be like this. And so what would probably look real cool? And then I also think of what's going on in the city that is something that I enjoy. So there's a lot of things that kind of go into it. And honestly, you're going to laugh when I say this, which is I will high five myself at times, like, oh, I got that. And then there are times it's sort of like fishing. I think especially landscape photography in particular, you do all the planning, the fish are going to be there, you put your reel out, and then nothing happens. And that happens, but I always try to think of how many times I've been successful in my planning.
And the dear listener should know, actually, that you have a slight advantage when it comes to planning. You have a relationship with knowing the weather like many photographers don't you?
I've dangerously become a self-taught meteorologist. I have, God, if I showed you my phone here, you'd crack up, but I have probably about 10, 15 apps that I go through.
Yeah.
And it's part of the puzzle where I'm like, okay, I got that. And then boom, this would probably be the right spot. And, I'm pretty good with it. And again, keep in mind, I'm planning typically 24 hours in advance, and most weather information is pretty good 24 hours in advance.
So right now, do you know where you're shooting tomorrow morning?
Yeah, tomorrow morning, my intent tomorrow morning is to be at a place called Montrose Harbor, Montrose Beach. We have some trees there that have some of the white spring buds that are
beautiful,
have bloomed, and I scouted that last night. See, and that's the other thing. I'll go out and I'll look, and I'm like, okay, is now the time? It's not the time. I looked at it last night and I said, it's going to look cool.
At what point did it all start to meld, where it became more professional, where there was dollars were attached to it?
I would say it developed real quickly. I would say it was probably 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm looking at a calendar right now. It's 10, 11 years ago, somewhere around. And I'll be honest, even to this day, I'm always surprised, like, wow, someone actually buys my stuff.
Yeah.
And it's neat. I do all the printing. I do all the shipping. So it's a whole process. So last year I signed and shipped over 8,000 books.
Whoa.
And then calendars, so I do a lot of calendars. Those sell every year. I've been doing that now for 7 years. And then there's the regular prints that I do. There's stuff that I call my permanent collection. And then I have stuff that I sell on a daily basis that it was a shot that I took yesterday, and it may not be in the permanent collection. So if you want to buy it, here you go. And what's interesting about that, I'll have situations where someone will buy something because their dog just passed away. And I happen to have a rainbow shot that day, and they'd love to have that as a memory. It's very interesting how sometimes my photographs mean more to someone that I actually even realize. I hear that often. My son was born. My father just passed away. I'd love to have the shot from yesterday. So I get a lot of that too. So, it's all a memory for someone.
Yeah.
And my intent is, how can I capture that magic moment of the day?
This is probably a good time to talk about your day-to-day, Barry. Your day starts really early, and I mean really early, and you have two fluffy assistants who are essentially your alarm clock.
Yeah, so I have two Labradoodles.
Yep.
One is it will be 14 years old here in a few weeks. He's seen more sunrises and sunsets than most people. Yeah. His name is Ajax. He's named after a ski run in Aspen. My sons named him after a ski run that they liked in Aspen. And then my other dog was also a Labradoodle. His name is Tusker, and he's named after Tusker Rock Lighthouse, which is off the coast of County Wexford. So, and he's 2 years old. One is he's 85 pounds. The other one's 75 pounds. They're big dogs. And it's nice to have big dogs in a city. When you're seeing me, but you're also seeing two big dogs, that kind of creates a little bit of security for me at some of the odd hours that I'm at. But the funny thing is that they're the friendliest dogs in the world. If someone came up, they would just roll over and want a belly rub. So, but, from the distance, they look imposing, and that's good enough for me. I
know you like to be behind the camera. I know that you're not somebody that courts the publicity in front of it. Although you've been getting lots of publicity. You've appeared on television programs and morning news and so on and so forth. But you have become a bit of a character within the city, haven't you? And there are cops, there are the fishermen, there are the early morning joggers that now, Barry, that's just Barry over there, that know you.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate in that respect. I have access to things that probably most people don't. Like, for example, during the pandemic here in Chicago last year, the entire lakefront of Chicago was closed off. Yeah. And you might recall the Neowise comet that we had coming through here in July. Yes. And I knew that the best shot for me to take would be at an inlet that was along the lakeshore, but it was closed off. And so the cops were out there. The police were at all points along the lakeshore. And I just went up to them. I introduced myself like, oh, yeah, I know. And so they're like, what? There's a comet coming over Chicago? I said, come on with. So I had two police officers join me while I'm taking this photograph, and they couldn't believe what they were seeing. I said, I'm not joking. But yeah, it's been, I've been very fortunate that people do know my name, and it's provided access to me. There are times where someone will say, hey, would you like to be on top of our building and take some shots? I have a funny feeling you're going to like the view. I heard you describe, while we talk about the TV stuff that's been done about you, there was a lovely, lovely film made about you where the host described you as Chicago's postcard poet. Do you like that title? I don't like any titles, and I don't like too much attention. But I really thought it was such a kind comment, but it also said a lot about what I do. I think people recognize that I love our city, and the work that I'm doing is authentic. It's not, it hasn't been manipulated where it's just like, wow, how could that ever have happened in Chicago? I really, my intent when I take a photograph, and it goes back to when I taught myself with film, is get it right in the camera, and use actual filters in front of the lens and things like that, because I don't want to spend my time in front of a computer. And so I make it authentic. And so I sometimes will qualify what I do as sort of like landscape journalism. And I think that's why the television stations really like my work, because they know that they can, whatever I'm posting that day, they know happened. Yeah. And so, because their credibility is on the line, and then they repost it onto their social media. So so I think and I think Mike even said it's like my love letter to the city.
He did, yeah.
I do. I love Chicago. I hope anyone who's listening to this will come to our city because it's really something special.
Back with Barry Butler in a moment. If you make films, slideshows or podcasts, you might like to know that the incredible music that's the creative glue between features and guests and clips is from a royalty-free music website, music library called artlist.io. And you will find a link through our website to them. So if you need music and you want to pay just one charge in a year to use hundreds upon hundreds of songs across all your projects, from YouTube through to weddings, through to podcasts and commercial photography and film jobs, this is what I personally recommend. And I use it day after day after day. The link is on our website, artlist.io. Just before we return to Barry Butler, learn how professional photographers design and share stunning wedding albums in 15 minutes. Fundy Designer is the perfect marriage between automation and control. So get the leading software used by the world's most profitable photographers for designing and selling your albums and wall art collections and cards and studio magazines and on and on and on. You can download the free trial or save, we like that word, an extra 25% off. The discount code is Photography Daily. It's Photography Daily when you go to their website, which I will link to in the show notes. Let's rejoin our guest, Barry Butler. You can see links to his website and examples of his work via the show notes, which is linked on your player app today. Are there favourite places that you visit? Because you've taken hundreds upon hundreds and hundreds of pictures. But there must be, I know there's a favourite image, we'll come to that, but are there favoured places that you go to where you think, Barry, this is going to work any day of the week for me? One of my spots is, it's funny, you were talking about the photograph that I assume that you want to talk about, which is the man sitting on the bench. That's the one, yeah.
That's probably one of my favorite views of the city. Yeah. There's another view which is probably about 10 miles south, and because there's rocks and there's the shoreline and it just looks rugged. So you can do so many things with that. You could just have a nice shot of the skyline, or you get real intimate with the rocks and use that as a really, a significant portion of your image. So, that's more on the south side of the city, and I love that. But that spot on Fullerton is a good spot.
Well, let's talk about that picture, actually, because I'm not quite sure whether you'll like this, Barry, but I refer to it as I refer to it as the Forrest Gump picture. Because I've
heard that.
I can see him on the bench. All right, the background is entirely different. I know that, but it does have that feeling. It's a very serene, very tranquil picture, which is lovely. But what is it about that picture? When I look at all your photographs that identifies that one as your favourite? Yeah,
because it's taught me everything about life. And here are the key parts, and then I'll explain the story. The first thing that it is taught me is patience, which is, you can have all the planning in the world and things are not working out exactly how you like. But if you keep true to your plan and be patient, things are going to work themselves out. Okay. So patience, optimism, it's going to work out. And then the last thing is to be able to pivot. Life is not exactly a straight arrow. You're going to have little, dodges in here, and you got to be able to be a little flexible and pivot. So those three things I think about in all aspects of my life. And basically what happened on that shot, as I mentioned, I do a lot of planning. And the planning that I saw for this one spot was I had two trees that had wonderful autumn colors on them, gold color.
Yeah.
And I knew I had about a 10-minute window where the setting sun would illuminate those leaves, and they would be a nice composition as it leads into the city of Chicago. Okay, so the city of Chicago, the skyline is in the background. Now, in the area is a bench. So I'm set up, and I'm like, I got this 10-minute window, and there's this gentleman who is walking back and forth in front of my composition. And now I'll be honest, under my breath, I'm saying every bad word in the book. All right. I'm like, I can't believe that this guy is going to be walking through there now. I don't have a lot of time. Get that out of here. Right. But he had every right to be there, so I just sat there, or stood there rather. And then he decided to sit down on the bench. I'm like, oh my God. And the composition was much wider.
Yeah.
And so I decided to just, be a little tighter. He was there and he was nice, the right third of my photograph, took the shot, and I'm like, holy moly. And, people are not often in my shots because of the times that I'm out at places, right? So that was one of the aspects of that was unusual for me, but it made the photograph. And I literally, and normally I don't do this, but I grabbed the camera and I looked at the back of it and I'm like, okay, it's in focus, right? And everything, because I had to really pivot very quickly. And by the time I put my camera back up, he was gone. He literally sat down for had to have been 30 seconds.
Wow.
That was it. But you would think that gentleman was there probably for an hour, just soaking in the skyline, the view, and he wasn't. And so I had one shot, and it worked out.
This is one of your most famous photographs. Has he ever?
Yeah.
Does he know? Have you met him?
I have no idea who it is.
This mystery man.
Yeah. I have no idea. I just let me tell you something. I was not happy with him up until that moment. So I didn't want to know who it was. I was hoping he was going to leave.
You mentioned you put him on the third, but you don't always work in threes. You quite like you like the number 7, don't you?
Yeah, I like shooting in 7s. That's how I frame. So if you look at my photographs, I would say probably 90% of the time you see 7s. I'm not very much a standard, working thirds. I'm always looking for 7s in my photographs because I feel like those are great leading lines. And when there's a lot of 7s, I feel like it's like the greatest photograph in the world.
I want to ask you this because you work in such a patient manner, and we'll come on to patience and weather in a moment as well. But how do you feel when you're making your pictures?
I feel at peace because I've done everything possible to make the image how I envisioned it. So again, with all the planning, I sit there and say the following are going to happen. And so I'm in most cases, I'm not surprised of what I walk up to. And it's, then the piece first settles in, and then I just be patient and wait for things to happen. Now, while I'm there, I'm always, my head's on a swivel. What could possibly happen that I had not planned for, and I'll make those adjustments. And I have my camera ready for those type of things. Always thinking a couple of steps ahead. It's usually a sense of peace. And like I said, when you get the photograph that you like, it will make my day. It just charges me like, wow, that was all worth it. It was worth getting up at 3:00 in the morning. There's a sense of accomplishment, that feeling like, hey, I did something positive today.
There's some glorious aerial shots in there, and you've mentioned already helicopters. Do you manage to get up there much in the helicopter? Yeah,
I love being out of a helicopter. Now, just to rewind, and one of the reasons why I know Chicago very well, when I was a teenager, I used to fly in helicopters doing traffic reports on the radio. So it's very comfortable for me to be in a helicopter. And it's pretty much you get harnessed in, and the windows are off, the doors off, and you hang out and you let it rip. It's not a cheap thing to do, but when I am up there taking those photographs, I know that I'll get a return on my investment.
Let me ask you about the weather. There's an enormously skilled shot of lightning on the John Hancock Center in the city, a very famous skyscraping landmark with a rainbow directly behind him. It's
oh yeah,
what a phenomenal picture. And that when you talk about patience, that is the game of patience, and of course a strong knowledge of what the weather is likely to do.
Yeah, so I have an iPad with me with the latest radar, and so I'm watching that lightning coming through. And the photograph that you're referencing, we had this wonderful, we had a storm that came through, and anytime with a lightning storm, you're still going to have, even if the storm is past, there's always some lightning, still in the air. And it was sunset, and I had the sun right behind me, so it was a wonderful rainbow developed over the John Hancock building. And I just said to myself, I'm going to keep my finger on that trigger because I just know we're going to have a lightning strike that's going to come through here. And in the city of Chicago, we have 3 buildings with high antennas, and those are just, those attract lightning. Yeah. So as I was seeing the radar and where the lightning patterns were coming, I'm like, it's just a matter of time. And I was just hoping that the rainbow would hold. And then all of a sudden, boom. Yeah. And it was awesome. I've never had that before, where rainbow and lightning all at the exact same time on the same building.
How long do you have to keep a shutter open to capture lightning?
Yeah, so I'm typically anywhere from 2 to 3 seconds. Right. I like to be at anywhere from f4, f5, 6, sometimes 8. But in that situation, because of the fact it was fairly bright, I put an ND filter on there. I think I had probably a 3-stop, so I could reduce some of the light that was in the sky. Most of my lightning shots are at night, so you don't have that issue. But yeah, I like it anywhere from 2 to 3 seconds, because most lightning, as much as it's quick, if and I'll use a cable release, there's usually enough lightning in the sky that you're going to capture it within that 2 to 3 seconds.
In terms of the weather, is there anything that keeps you inside? I know your dogs would have you out in all weather, but there are some there's incredible sub-zero temperature pictures as well. It gets cold in Chicago, that's for sure. Yeah,
winter is my favorite time of the year to shoot, because the landscape constantly changes. But what keeps me inside is completely gray skies and or just lashing rain. That doesn't excite me. I shooting puddles doesn't really do much for me. So that's probably the only time I sit there and say, I might, be able to sleep a little bit later today.
Okay, fine, I said hi, but I did not say goodbye. What do you want? That's my style. They call them Irish goodbyes.
Let's return to Ireland for a moment. Very proud moment of 2020, which was a difficult year for everybody. You won the IBAM Award, the Irish Books, Arts and Music. How did that feel?
That was pretty darn cool.
Yeah, I bet.
Don't want to get emotional here. So the Irish community here in Chicago is very strong. As a matter of fact, the county that Chicago is a part of has the most people with Irish heritage in the United States. Yeah. So there's a big Irish community here. It was last year, which was 2020. That was also the 100-year anniversary of my grandfather being on a hunger strike for 94 days in Cork prison. And so it all kind of came together. Like, here was this major event that happened 100 years ago in Ireland. And then here I'm, winning this recognition from the Irish community here. That really, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
When I think of things that I'm proud of photographically, that's definitely in my top 3.
Without pushing your buttons too much on that, but I know Dad would have loved that moment. He'd have been all over that moment, wouldn't he? Come on, son. Where's the book? He'd be saying. I can hear him now.
Well, and the other element of it, and there's so many things in my world came together on that one, is that the normally where the event is held at is the Irish American Heritage Center here in Chicago. Everything was done virtually.
Yeah.
But my dad would sing. My dad was a singer. And my dad would sing at the Irish American Heritage Center.
Would he?
So it was all kind of, again, everything was kind of coming full circle on that one. And that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just finally, is the job ever done? I mean, you've got hundreds and hundreds of pictures, as I've said a couple of times already in this interview. Sunrise, sundown, other times of the day, the night. Is it ever done?
No. And this is the one nice thing about shooting in a city, unlike regular landscape. We have a building going up on a regular basis here. We actually, in the last 2 years, have had 2 additional what we'll call skyscrapers. And we have 2 more that are going up in the next year. So the view always changes. Whereas, if you go to the Cliffs of Moher, okay, the Cliffs of Moher haven't changed in centuries, right?
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit here and there, maybe a big rock had fallen off, but it doesn't change. Where the skyline of a city, especially a city like Chicago, it's constantly changing. So it creates different looks and different compositions. As a matter of fact, there's a composition that I'm going to shoot here in 3 weeks. And it's because we just had a skyscraper completed in the last 6 months. And there are these really neat flowers that are going to be in the foreground. When they bloom, they will bloom here in 3 weeks. And I'm going to have the flowers and then this one a skyscraper in the background. So that wouldn't be there 2 years ago. It'd be just like I would just be taking photos of flowers.
Actually, listeners to this show will know that I'm a fond fan of Columbo, who always said just one more thing, and I have thought of one more thing. I bet you're pleased that you injured yourself playing that sport 2 decades ago.
Out of every negative, there's a positive.
Absolutely.
And we all have had setbacks in our lives, and every major setback I've had has turned into something really good. And that was one of the better ones. I don't wish a broken collarbone on my worst enemy, but I don't sit there and say, boy, I wish that never happened, because it did result in a lot of good things after it.
My sincere thanks to Barry Butler. It was an absolute joy spending time talking with Barry last week. And that's it for today. Keep sending your questions, your feedback and photo stories to studio@photographydaily.show so that I can feature you in the mailbag edition, which is the Friday Photo Walk. On that note, remember you can also send in pictures from your own photo walks to appear on the episode's show page, online with links to your website or Instagram. If you haven't yet, join our private Facebook group and follow us on Instagram. Links to all this and our guests and our wonderful supporters on Patreon, I'm tipping my hat to you now, will be on the Photography Daily show page as always. Linked to in your podcast player app as always. Now, Wednesday, we hear from a culturally significant and important photographer in British photographic history. A Jamaican-born restaurateur and documenter during the period of West India migration to London. However, his subject matter has also included film stars and student protests across Europe, with his photographs appearing in Harper's Bazaar and Life and Vogue. And he shares his story from the start.
So I was about 13, 14 at the time, and I used to do a paper round. And the one day I popped into, I think it's a Boots chemist or Timothy something chemist, and bought a Johnson's book for 3 and 6, Do-It-Yourself Photography.
He was followed and admired greatly by Cartier-Bresson, no less. But we discuss also the darker period of Charlie's life. A time which he talks very candidly about in Wednesday's edition.
Biggest mistake coming back to England. Well, when I came back, I showed my work around, and people used to say, "Did you really take that?" And they used to fob me off, and I couldn't get one assignment. And the last straw was I was with Hendrix at Isle of Wight Festival, and I had some backstage photographs with them, and I took them around and I said, "Did you really take that?" And I thought I must have found them in the thing, So when nobody wanted them, I'd get demoralized and went on to wash dishes and work in a restaurant.
Music on the show from the incredible artlist.io, and I look forward to photographing with you, hearing from you and talking with you Wednesday.
Photography Daily is a Loading Zone production.